Mintzberg and management. The two words have been linked together successfully for 4 decades. McGill professor Henry Mintzberg has developed an international reputation as perhaps the world's premier management thinker. His career was born out of a need he identified as a graduate student.
I did my doctorate at a time when people in business schools were not remotely interested in management. There was just no attention to management at all. There wasn't even a course in management where I studied at MIT.
So he decided to study managers. His doctoral thesis became the basis of his first book, The Nature of Managerial Work, published in 1973.
I studied managers, and what did I say in my first book that got the most attention? That managers are interrupted a lot, that it's a very action-oriented thing. That was patently obvious to anybody who had ever managed or spent a day observing a manager. It was patently obvious. So what makes me so special? Nothing. I just wrote it down, that's all. Nobody happened to write it down. I was there. I said, gee, it's not what everybody says. This isn't planning, organizing, coordinating, and controlling, to take the most popular words to describe management. This is about getting interrupted and trying to keep your head above water. And everybody said, wow, geez, so fantastic. And I said, I refuse to take credit. I just happened to be there. I wrote it down.
13 books later, Mintzberg has written what he calls his last book on management, aptly titled Managing.
Management is neither a science nor a profession. It's a practice, and the practice fundamentally doesn't change. What changes is the content of what you're dealing with.
He says if anything about management has changed in recent years, it's technology, and in particular, the onslaught of email.
I think it's driving a lot of the practice of management over the edge. That people are just too harassed and too short-term and too pressured. And you might see the effect of this current financial crisis as partly caused by that.
Over the course of his career, he has gone back and forth between studying managers and analyzing strategies.
Well, I've always argued that strategic planning is an oxymoron in the sense that strategies don't come out of a formally planned process. Most strategies, and the interesting strategies, tend to emerge as people solve little problems and learn things. And they don't come out sort of Moses coming down the mountain with the tablets. They come out as some little thought that grows into a major shift in how a company sees the world. So at IKEA, they tried to stuff a table into I can't remember if it was a car or a truck. The manager just, they were taking a table somewhere and they couldn't get it in, so they took off the legs and they put it in, and then somebody said, well, wait a minute, if we can't get it in, how are customers supposed to get it in? And that led to them selling their furniture in knockdown packages. And that's the central heart and soul of their strategy, or one big piece of it. So that's how strategies develop.
In the mid-1990s, Mintzberg turned his attention to management education and the classic MBA, the Masters of Business Administration program.
The assumption is that you can create a manager in a classroom or create a leader in a classroom, which is even worse. And it's completely fallacious. It's an absolute sham. You cannot create a manager or a leader in a classroom. And I was kind of highly critical of MBA programs, and people started asking the embarrassing question that you should never ask an academic, which is, what are you doing about it? And it's kind of like, I'm not supposed to do anything about anything. I'm just supposed to criticize. Anyway, we got embarrassed into acting, and we created the IMPM, the International Masters in Practicing Management, and a whole series of programs that followed, culminating in what's called Coaching Ourselves, which is a kind of self-study thing. And the idea is that we wanted to change the whole philosophy of how managers were developed in classrooms.
The IMPM revolutionized management education. Participants are practicing managers who come from around the world. Together they explore management concepts as they relate to their real-life experiences. Seated at round tables, they engage in what Mintzberg calls friendly consulting.
The key is to tap into the natural experience of practicing managers. Most managers are thoughtful given half a chance, and they're in touch all the time, or they should be. If the senior management could get off their backs with all these individual performance targets and everything. We're all different people, But we're social animals too. And I
The
think
success of the
society has
IMPM
just
program
swung
led to
so
other
far
programs,
to the
including a
individual
condensed version,
dimension
the
and
ALP, Advanced Leadership Program, in which companies send teams of 6 managers to sit at those round tables and tackle organizational issues. They learn from their colleagues' experiences, as well as from the other corporate teams, and they bring their insights back to their organizations.
So I see partners as generating revenue, so I have resources to help partners.
So McGill's, I think, light years ahead of almost any other school. The only schools that are kind of with us in a way are some of the schools in England that have programs that are quite progressive in the sense of taking people who are managers and focusing on them learning by reflecting on their own experience. But in North America, that's almost unheard of outside McGill.
Other innovative programs include the International Masters in Health Leadership, IMHL, for managers from all aspects of healthcare, coming from all regions of the world, and the E-Roundtables, which bring together EMBA students from different programs around the world.
This is a lovely story. This guy who runs a factory in Mexico City attended one of our programs and emailed us back this photograph when he got back. And he says, I put a round table in my factory, and now every time we have a problem, we get our team around the table to reflect on what the problem is.
From these programs sprang an independent study initiative called Coaching Ourselves. Conceptual materials and discussion topics are available via the internet. Now managers virtually anywhere can benefit from this kind of reflection and friendly consulting with colleagues. These innovative programs have allowed Mintzberg to see firsthand how managers function in a myriad of roles and organizations. He chose 29 managers to study for his latest book, Managing, from an orchestra conductor and bank CEO to a refugee camp director and the head nurse of a surgical ward.
The amazing thing is a variety of experiences. And at one point in the book, I say that it's like life itself because managing is about almost everything in life itself.
He was struck by both the differences and similarities facing these 29 managers. His challenge was to synthesize their experiences into a concept of what is managing.
We know what managers do, we just don't have a decent conceptual description of it.
Mintzberg wanted to come up with a graphic representation, a visual aid, depicting the essence of managing. 20 years in the making, here is the Mintzberg model of managing.
The manager sits between the unit that's being managed. You know, if it's a sales manager, then it's the sales department. If it's a chief executive, then it's the whole company, and the world outside that unit. And I argue that people manage on 3 planes, if you like, okay? The purpose of managing is action. The purpose of managing is to ensure and encourage the kinds of actions in the unit. That's the purpose of the unit itself. So sometimes people manage the action directly, but usually they're one or two steps back from that. So the second plane, one step back, is managing people, managing on the people plane to encourage them to take action. Dealing with people's problems, encouraging them, patting them on the back, holding meetings, all that kind of stuff. And 2 steps back is managing on an information plane. So it would be sharing information, collecting information, managing through information. A lot of management in large corporations today at senior levels is about managing the numbers. It's about giving people targets and making sure they meet them and so on. It's become so bad, so excessive on that plane that I call this management by deeming. You sit in an office and you deem that somebody will cut costs by 10%, and you fire them if they don't. I mean, my granddaughter who's 4 could do that. That doesn't take genius, but that's managing on the information plane. But there's lots of functional parts. And my argument is that every manager is to manage on all 3 planes, although they may tilt towards one or the other, depending on the job they're in. Everybody gets that in the program.
Mintzberg argues that the recent financial crisis is in fact a crisis of management, the result of companies focusing on heroic leadership and the bottom line.
Organizations are communities of human beings. They're not collections of human resources where you kind of fire and hire and, you know.
He calls for
like
communityship. Companies must be rebuilt as communities.
And I think a lot of companies have totally lost the sense of community. Largely because of all these downsizing and mismanagement and too much leadership hype, which takes the it puts the emphasis on a single individual as the be-all and end-all of the future for the company, as opposed to recognizing the role of middle managers and the critical role of middle managers. So we need to rebuild that sense of community in our organizations.
Known as a straight talker, Mintzberg argues the days of obscene compensation packages should be over.
The claim, which is a phony claim, it's a kind of old boys network claim, is that if you don't pay these bonuses, you won't get the best people. I reverse that and say quite the opposite. Anybody who demands these bonuses demonstrates that he or she is not a team player, that they're not concerned with the long-term interests of the company, and the very fact that they're demanding these bonuses should exclude them from the job.
An avid outdoorsman, Henry Mintzberg prefers spending his free time away from organizations.
Look at how delicate that is.
He appreciates the industriousness of the beaver and collects what he calls their discarded beaver sculptures.
See, they eat most of the bark, but not all of it. It's this idea of serendipity in a way. It's this idea that you kind of learn from things that just happen. And art is something, it's not just what we make as art consciously, it's also what just happens. Some artist, some inadvertent artist, namely a beaver, I guess we can call them inadvertent artists, just come up with something that's absolutely beautiful. And that's the way I view strategy, it's like the wheels, it's like the legs on the table, they just come up with things inadvertently that change the world.
Kind of like Mintzberg himself, an observer of nature and human nature, whose inadvertent research path has led him on a journey to change the world of managing.